Welcome back to another episode of the Doctors and Dollars podcast. I'm joined today by Dr. Amna Shabbir. Amna is a board-certified internal medicine physician with a specialty in geriatric medicine. She's also a certified life coach and a certified health and wellness physician coach, getting that distinction from Duke University. While she enjoys working clinically with older patients, she also founded the Early Career Physicians Institute to help young physicians through their unique challenges in the first 5 years of post-medical training. Welcome to the show, Dr. Shabbir.
So happy to be here, Nate. Thank you.
What is going well today?
That's a great question. I think I started with gratitude that I could ease my way into the day today, which is not something that I was able to do previously. So, despite the chaos in the morning with the kids drop off and all the things, I still have gratitude that I was able to do some reflection and some journaling, and that allows me to create a better rest of my day. So, I'm happy.
That is awesome. So the journaling and kind of meditation and things like that, when did you start that within your daily routine?
Yeah, so journaling actually was part of my life from a very early age. I
Oh,
can't even pin down exactly. Maybe I was in fourth grade or fifth grade when I started, but sporadically, like it would come in bursts later on in life. And for a long time, I ignored it as medical education unraveled. I was so busy just trying to keep myself together, recognizing that what had helped me get to where I was at was what I was ignoring because it allowed me to reflect and ponder. And I love to write. So then I ignited this passion of journaling. I would say when burnout started in my life and career as a young attending physician. As far as meditation goes, I will caution and share that I am not an expert on that, but I am
mhm.
trying. I am trying because with the way our minds are, and this is something I'm always very open with my clients, I think I have become better with mindfulness. And that practice, I would say it's been about a year and a half, where I've been very conscious with mindfulness and continue to see benefits of it.
Yeah, so keeping mindfulness top of mind, no pun intended there, but do you ever feel like either of those things, the meditation or the journaling, do they sometimes ever feel like a chore? Like I got a streak going, I got to keep doing it, but I don't really need to because I'm already in a good space? Or does it feel therapeutic for you like every day that you're doing it?
I love it. I look at it as
Great.
a disease management of a chronic state. It helps your brain stay in check. So when the brain is all over the place, it's a great way to bring it back and recalibrate and see all the thoughts that are running inside your
Mhm.
head. But also the days where everything is going good, you're like, "Wow, I don't want to sit and take out time and write." But I have continued to do that. And I recognize that, and I work with my clients on this point as well, that management of this chronic state is so much important because it prevents those severe inflammations where your brain is going all over the place. Because if you're doing a practice daily, it just helps. Now, the part of if it sounding or feeling like a chore is the thing that I like to break down. And it
Mhm.
doesn't have to feel like a chore because in our brains, it's like, oh, I need a beautiful pen and I need this amazing notebook and then I shall journal. I don't do it like that. I use an app. Sometimes my journaling is just me dictating into that app and I will just do a quick download of my thoughts. It would take about maybe a minute. And that allows me, okay, this morning I feel good because of XYZ, or this morning I feel terrible because of XYZ. So it allows me to reflect and see what common themes are presenting in my life. But the more doable we make things, the easier they get. But yeah, some days it can still, your brain will throw like, why are you doing this? And so those
Mhm.
are the days that you remind yourself, like, okay, when I do this, I see XYZ results. And so, ergo, I don't feel like doing it, but I'm still going to.
That's awesome. Well, that's great insight. I appreciate you sharing that because that's, a lot of people will say, hey, they do journaling every morning or they have some type of morning routine that gets them in a good headspace. And a lot of people don't like to share that, what it is that they do, and definitely don't share what they're saying. But that is, I appreciate you sharing that because that's certainly something that's important for people to do is to get themselves in the right headspace going into their day. Otherwise, there's always that saying like, don't let 10 seconds of something ruin the other 23 hours and 59 minutes of the day just because of one thing. And so I think being able to recenter yourself and find that good headspace, whether you want to do it or not, or you don't feel like you need to, I think that's super important. So kudos to you.
Thank you. I just want to quickly add to that. A lot of us are
Mhm.
operating under the arrival fallacy. Like,
Mm,
Your day ends with a list of tasks that you did not accomplish, and your day starts with all the things you have to do that day. And that is such a drag. But if you were to quickly just take inventory, and that's where mindfulness comes in as well, like you don't have to be sitting cross legged and thinking of it that way. You can just practice it right here, right now, because this is, I'll play into the cliche and say, this is all you have right now, this moment. But
mhm,
if you do a quick inventory in the morning and you say, okay, I feel like this, get in touch with yourself. And 30 seconds, 1 minute, whatever it is, before you just rush into doing things, because at the end you are a human being, not a human doing. But that's the whole arrival fallacy, where like when XYZ is done, then I will feel better. When all the checklist items are done on my day, then I will feel better. So I think that by incorporating journaling and mindfulness, it has allowed me to slow down and recognize, well, maybe there's more that's going well in my life than I'm giving credit to.
mhm. Yeah, great added thought there. Thank you for doing that as well. In in your bio there that I read there at the beginning, mentioned geriatric medicine as something that you started your career in. What was it that steered you down the path? You know, going into internal medicine. I know once you get that internal medicine designation, there's a bunch of different ways you can go. What attracted you to geriatric medicine?
When initially I started practicing after my residency, I went into full time primary care practice. I did that for about 4 years. And during that time, there were a lot of moments where I had doubt and had severe burnout happen. And that's the time that also, while I was an early career physician and a new attending, the pandemic happened.
Mhm,
I had my second daughter. So a lot of things was happening in parallel in my life. And it was forcing me to recalibrate and recognize, what do I want to do? And I know that and there was a moment where I wanted to walk away from medicine completely, but I had to ask myself, what gives me real joy when I'm practicing primary care? And that was actually taking care of older adults, helping families navigate complex care. I find that very spiritually fulfilling. So my answer to my burnout was more medical training. After working as a primary care physician, I went back into fellowship and did my fellowship in geriatrics.
okay.
And since then, I now work part time in nursing home facilities, and I absolutely enjoy that. In addition to, as you mentioned, my coaching practice, which is for early care physicians.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and you kind of answered or started to answer my next question, which I know that you were an early career physician when the pandemic hit. Also having a daughter at that time, a lot of irons in the fire, right? What do you think was your biggest learning opportunity or your biggest takeaway in those first few months of the pandemic when all these things were happening?
I think that human beings persevere. We
Mm,
always show up, and those first few months were allowing everyone to see and find their true selves. Whether that was fear overcoming, or people doing acts of heroism going over there, or anxiety, like all of it was coming through. And for me, I knew I had to work. Like that was never like a question. I was raised by parents. All my mom was, she asked was like, do you have an N95? And I said, yes, go do your job. That was her response. So there was a lot of like uncertainty and fear, and definitely that was very prevalent. I think that also just revealed a time where we found out how vulnerable our healthcare workers are. We will how, vulnerable direct care workers were, people in nursing homes, where I was not working in nursing homes at that time, but all of those things were very apparent. And I think that institutes that wanted to learn from that learn from it. And unfortunately, the ones that didn't learn from it are continuing to operate in that way. But
mhm,
it allowed, I think, healthcare as en masse to have a point of reflection. I definitely see a lot of reflection that was forced upon physicians and other healthcare workers. Like, what are we doing with our lives here? How are we appreciated? How are we protected, to come upon?
Let's imagine for a moment COVID never happened.
Mm.
That would be great, right? If it just never happened, but
Yeah.
let's imagine it didn't. Do you think you would have still experienced some of the same burnout, some of the trials and tribulations that you did around that time?
Absolutely, Nate, because I
Mm,
burnt out, I would
prior
say, in the
to?
first couple of months. Then I started
Mm,
practicing as an early career physician. The systems that are flawed and that are in place in our healthcare system in large, they were always there. And the odds are always stacked against your primary care physician when they're working in the traditional model. There's never enough time. there's always more patients. Our patients deserve excellent care, and our physicians are crying to be able to prescribe that excellent care. So you're squeezing in visits that should be way longer in shorter amount of time, and physicians don't have enough support. So it's like a game in which the target is constantly moving. It's a moving target and you can never achieve it. So to answer your question, yes, the burnout came earlier. And then in medicine, also, like there is the system, and then you also select people that have certain tendencies. So I just, maybe I'll talk about myself. I wanted to do a
Mhm.
lot. I definitely played into perfectionism and wanting to make sure that my work was well done. So all of that, it was just the perfect storm.
And so this was happening. You became attending in 2017, correct?
Yes.
And so this was happening early on, pre-pandemic, even
Mm.
that some of these things were happening. Was that more of an environmental thing, more than, and when I say environmental, more of the system in place
Yeah.
that you were a part of?
Yeah, I think that this is the sentiment that you can take any primary care physician anywhere in the country that works in the traditional model where insurance is accepted, and you have to see like the patient time and the things that you have to do. Yeah, everyone's story will pretty much be the same. And that's why when I share my story, a lot of people can sometimes feel, oh, it's just another physician talking about burnout, because so many
Hmm.
have now talked about. But even in that, our stories are so unique, right? When somebody goes through burnout, we use the phrase, but what really is burnout? It can look different for so many people. Like the other day I said that for me, burnout was like a loss of dream. And it literally was heartbreak. And if you ask me like how emotionally did I feel, because at my heart I will always be a primary care physician. I was in the primary care track during residency, and when I came out and I practiced, like that's all I had ever envisioned myself to do. But then I just couldn't do it anymore. And so between that, walking away completely from medicine, and then just reassessing our values, that's where you find yourself. And I'm glad I pivoted.
Yeah, for sure. At what point then did your daughters come into play? Was this at the point when you were walking away from medicine and finding that pivot? Is that when you were also having children?
Yep. So my first daughter was born during a residency, and
Mhm.
my second daughter was born as an early career physician. And
Okay.
it's a little funny that I had my postpartum depression. I heard from everyone, oh, the second time it might be easier on you. I suffered from it the first time as well, but the episode was shorter. However, the second time it was longer, and it definitely, I think there was burnout happening in parallel, and then my postpartum depression was happening in parallel. It was just the perfect storm. And it's just also recognizing what kind of places and spaces are we creating for mothers in medicine. It allowed me to have that reflection. I will say that my postpartum journey was more personal. I felt that there were personal and cultural things that I was looking at. Maybe I had my own biases. Like I didn't share the fact that I was going through this with my own parents because I thought that they might think that I'm a failure or that they are a failure.
Mhm.
However, I shared in the best way that you can. You write an article about it a couple of years later and you publish it, and then you send that article to your parents. That's what I did. And my dad, he looked at it, he read the article, and he said, "Wow, like I'm sorry that you went through this, and I'm glad that you got help, and I'm glad that you're sharing your story now so that other people can get help." And I completely did not expect that outcome
Mhm.
from him or from my mother, but that's the reaction I got. And however, when it was happening, I felt that the all the cultural messages, even the culture of medicine, it's that you are, it's like showing sign of weakness, like, oh, you cracked, you know you're
Yeah.
going through this. So there was a lot of shame that was attached to me feeling the way I was feeling. So I think probably five people knew, my husband included, a close friend, my brother, that I was going through this. And I did seek pharmacotherapy for a short period of time, just enough to make me feel better. And then I tapered it off instantly. And we talk about why physicians, don't talk about their mental health struggles. And one of the biggest hurdles is that you have to pretty much report everything to the board, like what you're taking. And
Mhm.
I just took it just enough, I would say, like I recommend my patients take it for 3 months. And I think it was just that much. And then I stopped, and I was fine afterwards, like, because I was also seeking support in other forms that was non-medication related. But, all this rush that we create, all of this, it just generates layers of feeling shame, of feeling inadequate. I definitely felt challenged. So those personal struggles were happening, and then I had some additional health struggles happen. And I felt that my humanity didn't have space at that time in medicine. My
Mm,
existence as a human didn't have space with my existence as a primary care physician.
The Physicians Financial Summit is coming to Chicago in 2024. Now, the Physicians Financial Summit is probably exactly the opposite of what you think it is. I'm sure you've gotten a free dinner and went to an event where a financial advisor shared a few things and tips and tricks. That's not what this is. You're not going to get a free dinner, unfortunately, and we are not financial advisors. This is going to be an action packed 2 days where we break down the exact playbook that I used that allowed me to retire at the age of 33 and is going to guarantee that you are prepared and ready for a prosperous retirement. Now, there's way too much info that I can cover in this video, but I will promise you two things. One, this is going to change your life forever. And two, we are going to make this much simpler than you realize was possible. Just like you break down important and complicated medical stuff for us as patients, we're going to do the same for you. So, if talking about money would make you want to pull your hair out, this is not the event for you. But if you want to see behind the scenes of how the wealthy prepare their financial futures and what you can do to be better prepared financially, then we will see you there in March 2024, Chicago.
where do you feel like that was self-inflicted, or was there again environmental things where you, as you were experiencing some of these things, you're like, man, no, I'm not being heard, I'm not being cared for, and all of these things that are happening around you then almost perpetuate that feeling.
Well, burnout is an occupational phenomenon to begin with, right? Whenever
Hmm.
we use it. So there's always both. But yeah.
Yeah. So you were talking about shame. So I know that I, I'm like you. I believe it is so important for physicians to voice the challenges that they're facing to peers, to parents. Online is a big one. Like not only as a form of digital therapy, but also to let others know that they're not the only ones going through it. Right. It probably would have helped if you would have voiced those things, and then others would have come in and surrounded you and said, hey, we've gone through the same things. I'm also a physician mother. Kind of have that community. Give me a few thoughts on that shame and where it was. What was that point where, and maybe it was around that short stint of therapy that you received, but when did you feel that breakthrough happen where it was like, okay, I do now feel valued, I do feel heard, and those low feelings that you had before went away?
I'm going to give you the honest answer here, Nate. The honest answer is
Sure.
that the shame part of it truly went away when I publicly shared on last Mother's Day on the article that I published, because that was my challenge to myself that I'm going to share in such a public way. There's
Mhm.
no going back from it. But there were steps that had to go all the way up to that. By then my younger was 4 years old and my older is now almost 7. So, we can see it took me that long to be that
Yeah,
public about
years.
it.
Hmm.
Absolutely. So before that, there was work that I did with my counselor and my coach. A lot of self-reflection. There were a lot of books, and there was there was coaching in group, and there was coaching 101 that allowed me to process. And somewhere in that journey, I recognized that I am not broken. It's not
Hmm.
me. Postpartum depression happens to people. And the more quiet I stay, because shame thrives in silence. And it was my challenge. And I think that I set myself to that challenge after I finished my training as a coach. And I said, okay, let's share, because I've been quiet for so long. And I used to write, as I mentioned earlier, and just stopped doing all those other creative activities that I enjoyed. And so that's when I did that, when I wrote that article, there were so many people that reached out to me. And it's the absolute support that you talked about. I think that me sharing so publicly generated a lot of healing. I then also shared my story in a podcast interview, which was also very helpful. And a big shout out to Dr. Kara Pepper, who created that space for me to share
Hmm.
about it. But there were so many male physicians that reached out to me in direct messages and shared that, wow, I think I went through that. And postpartum depression and anxiety also happens in men. So afterwards, when people shared their stories, I thought that was very powerful. I continue to be very happy about my decision.
Hmm.
However, when I say this, like, there's so many people that are staying quiet and that, they don't talk about this, but they're going through it, either
Hmm.
through because of personal reasons, cultural reasons, other reasons. I had a client of mine share that, and this is also an early career physician, have permission to share this. Their peers were viewing maternity leave as vacation time. So
Wow.
this human,
Yeah.
like, anyone who has had a child knows it's anything but vacation. So
Hmm.
these are the kind of messages that are floating around you in the environment, and we need to slowly start recognizing that. And if you're a good physician, if you're a good female physician, and I say good, air quotes over there, whatever that means to people,
Hmm.
you really care about your colleagues, and you don't want them to pick up your shifts or do your work on your behalf because you know what it feels like. So add that layer where you don't want to actually be doing that, and then hair
Yeah.
back.
Drop the shame, and now you pick up guilt
Yeah,
almost.
yeah.
Yeah.
So exactly. And then you just marinate the shame and the guilt and the self-criticism, because
Hmm.
that was also, I would say, very heavy overtones. And I've been working a lot on self-compassion work that goes around with, like, along with mindfulness work, has been really helpful. So you have somebody who strives for perfectionism, who has a hard time setting boundaries, who's ashamed that they're suffering from postpartum depression, who is guilted that they don't want to seek help for it. And it just perpetuates this extremely negative cycle.
Do you feel, in a sense, though, that there's, because this is really powerful stuff, and so I have to ask this question. Do you feel like the journey that you've gone through since 2017 was for a purpose, in a sense that you had to experience those feelings during that time as you were having kids, and having those experiences, with work and the shame and the guilt, to be able to make you a better physician coach so that you can be the voice for your clients, or your patients, to tell them, hey, I went through this same thing. Here's how great I felt after sharing it, and so that they do it sooner than later, because it sounds like you went a few years, 3 or 4 years, before sharing it and feeling some of that weight come off. Do you feel like this has created a purpose for you?
100%, if not
Okay.
more. I have no regrets about my journey. I would People ask me, if you could go back in time, like, what would you do? I probably The only thing that stands out for me is self-compassion, because there was a lot of self-criticism that was overlaying all of this drive. But
Mm-hmm.
as far as to what happened and how it happened, absolutely, because it's like that list you make when you grow up: don't do this XYZ. So it was a really good learning opportunity. And I would say there was a lot of growth that came from it. There were lots of very, very isolating and lonely moments. And that is why, if you ask me in a nutshell, who do I help? I help the past version of me. I want to go back in time and embrace that early career physician, that young attending who had just come out of residency and was going through all of these challenges. And at that time, it was so hard to explain. It's so hard to explain when you just started working and you're already burning out. And meanwhile, you have colleagues
Mm-hmm.
that have worked for decades. It's really hard to explain that. It's so
Mm-hmm.
hard to explain to anyone that you're going through postpartum depression, where on surface you look so put together. It's very hard to explain your struggles in life because you're establishing yourself in your home, at your work, the the questions patients ask you, the biases that you face, like ageism, not just for older adults but also for youngers.
Mm-hmm.
So I absolutely, Nate, learn from my experiences. I am grateful for them. And I don't want other physicians who are at that stage of life to struggle alone. Because at that time, when I was looking for help, I couldn't find help that was specific for me. There was
Hmm.
a lot of other help that was out there. I'm grateful for the one that I did get. I love my coach. However, there is something about the early career years in that transition when you are leaving and you're in those first couple of years, the challenges that you're having are different. And it's very hard
Mm.
to express again those feelings that, I feel kind of bad. But whereas everyone else is like, why are you feeling bad? You have a great job and da da da
Hmm.
da. So yeah.
Yeah, when I think about the avatar that would be your client, that someone who needs to have a physician coach like you, I think you did a good job of kind of explaining, excuse me, what that looks like. Do you feel like there's a lot of shame is not the right word. I'm trying to think of the right word. Do you think there's a lot of hiding that comes with being a young physician who is having the same thoughts and feelings that you had early in their career? And the thoughts of, well, I haven't put in my time yet. Like I can't go complain or express my thoughts to an older physician who's 20 years in because they've been around for 20 years. I haven't put in my time to be able to have some of these complaints. Is there some of that? I would feel like that's something that would cross my mind is I'm 2 years in and I'm having all these deep feelings and I'm having what feels like burnout. And I'd be like, I need to put in more time. Like I can complain about things when I'm 20 years in if I'm still feeling this way. Do you feel like that's kind of normal?
Yes, that is
Okay.
normal. And I think it's a layer on layer of imposter syndrome, right? Because you're
Hmm.
having, just to throw this number out, on average, after you're done with training and you start as a new attending, you are 12,000 to 16,000 clinical hours in of work to begin with. That's quite a bit. So
12 to 16,000. Yeah,
Mhm. That's just clinical hours that I'm talking
yeah, I
about,
was
like
gonna
with
say, I mean,
patient
that could be
care.
5 or 6 years. Yeah.
Yeah. But still, and all good physicians at some point have felt like an imposter.
Hmm.
So if you don't feel it, if you feel it, that means you're already doing a good job. That's something I share with my clients. And I know that I've used the word imposter syndrome, but I'm starting to go away a little bit from it because we just tend to love pathologizing something that could be normal. So it's
Yeah.
normal to have those feelings, right? And it's also normal then to not want to share that. Like you already feel like an imposter and you feel bad and you want support, but you don't want the world to find out. So it's the hiding within the hiding. And then you're like, well, I'm just going to wait and this is just going to like iron itself out. I recently did a video and I shared that on my Substack newsletter with my subscribers. It was about 3 things you don't want to do if you feel like your job is a mismatch. And one of those things I'll share here is nothing, doing nothing and waiting for things to just iron out. And that feeling of not wanting other people to find out, that's what you do. And then the other thing is doing a lot, because that was my
Mm.
solution.
Try and cover it up.
If I take on all the extra roles that I can find for which I don't have protected time, clearly everyone is going to know, look at this young, eager physician. Doesn't matter. She's expecting, she has kids at home, like, and then she's doing all these extra things because then I will prove my worth. And then it's
Hmm.
constantly like I'm proving my worth and constantly building that resume. And then just playing back into the arrival fallacy that when I would have put X number of hours, years, X number of roles, X number of projects, then I will be worthy of respect. And that,
Yeah.
mind you, all of these things, yes, there's a culture that's around you that, definitely encourages that. But there's also you, because every time I needed help, if I had one of my colleagues, they were always helpful. If there was one amazing thing, even in my most terrible burnout experience, the feeling of loneliness and isolation came from the fact that there was not another early career physician that I could get support
Mm.
from, or somebody who specifically understood my concerns. But every time I tried to reach out to another colleague, they helped, even though they were drowning or they were burnt out. So that collegiality or that aspect in my practice was very much there. And so I think maybe there was my also shame. Like, I don't want to ask this question. Like, what are they going to think? Like, she went to all these good institutes, and what's the quality of the question that you bring? Whereas all you're looking for sometimes is just support. And the
Yeah.
questions usually are not as clinical because, again, it's more of like a process question, an insurance question, or a system question. But at the earlier stages, you have all those questions, and you're staying quiet. And then another thing that you do, because you want to prove your worth. Is like you don't want to say no. You don't want to say no to anything because,
Yep.
of course, if you're like, if you're a female physician, then you absolutely don't want to threaten anyone with your presence by
Mhm.
maybe setting a boundary, maybe by, being clear with the way you would like to practice medicine is. You absolutely want to lay low, say yes to everything, take on all the projects, and then later on wonder why you burned out.
You just don't want to be perceived as like a boss, and I mean that in the most culturally 2024 way of saying it. Like, being a boss, right? You just don't want to be perceived that way, because then there's probably pushback or fallout from being perceived that way for years after your career. And so yeah, I mean, I remember when I was in risk and compliance at a large national bank for early in my career, and I got promoted to leading a team. And I just remember that first time I led the team, there was that, right, imposter syndrome of like, oh gosh, can I, like, I'm now leading the team I was just on. Like, all of these people were my peers, now I'm leading them. And so there was some of that imposter syndrome, but then there was exactly what you talked about. Now I have to say yes to everything. Like, now that I'm the young manager, I'm the young guy that, all of my other peers now as a leader are much older than me and they've been around forever. I got to say yes to everything. And so I felt that when you were describing that. I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what was happened to me. I want to call it, 2013, 2014. It was scary back then, but now reflecting back on it as you were talking, I'm like, that's exactly what I was feeling. And I'm glad I got myself out of that situation, or at least spoke up and turned the tide and did something different. So I totally get that. One thing I definitely wanted to ask you about is communication. So you've talked a lot about recently online and newsletters and things like that, about creating a healthy workplace environment, right? And specifically about communication. What should early career physicians, day one of attending, even one that's, maybe 4 or 5 years in, what should they know about communication in the workplace and why that is so important to create that?
Nate, it goes back to the conversation I think we had just before we pressed the record button, which was you teach people how to treat you. And so
Mm,
recognize that when you're communicating as well. So communication will go with nonverbal, verbal, the way you're presenting yourself at the clinic or wherever your workspace is. It could be the OR, it could be the hospital system at large when you're at rounds. So how are you showing up, and how are you speaking, how are you writing, and how are you communicating in all other forms like electronic and verbal and nonverbal. So the first thing you want to ask yourself as an early career physician is, how do I want to show up before you actually just start, right? So as you're
mhm,
switching, and even if you have been a couple of years, and now would be a great time if you're listening to this to reflect, how do I want to show up? And I would start from, how do you want to show up physically? How do you want to show up mentally? And what is the perception that is most authentic to you that you want to communicate with the outside world? And yes, physicians are, there's a certain level, a standard of expectation in the way you dress and how you show up. But are
mhm,
you aligning that with what you like? Is that even present? So I would just recommend taking a blank piece of paper and asking that question to yourself, because it's not a uniform one size fits all for everyone. And that's where it becomes difficult. For example, one of the values that I like to have is professionalism is very important to me. And as I know, most physicians, it's very important. But also, confidence and clarity is very important to me as well. So, as time has gone by, I've dropped bridging language. Instead of writing in an email, I think I will do this, da da da, I will write, I will do this, I will remove the think. Because ask myself, I'm actually going to do that thing. So, it can start very simply by, how do I want to physically show up? And then how do I want to communicate? And then you want to ask yourself, what are your goals with that? And that's a work that, you can, it would be better served by doing that in some form of like coaching setting, group setting. But just ask yourself, and then the second question to ask is, first, figure out your style, what you want to project. Remember, you're teaching everyone how to treat you. So if you're showing up in a sloppy way, and if you're saying yes to everything, if you're showing up great, but you're still saying yes to everything, that's what you're communicating. I am 100% available to you. Please
mhm.
message me all the time. And that could go for your patients, it could go for your colleagues, it could go for your leadership, it could go for your admin staff. If Dr. So and so is always saying yes to everything, the communication and the message that you're giving everyone is that you're completely and utterly available, and this is the sum total of your life. But if
Mhm.
you are conscious about what you want to share with people, because we know that the latter will just burn you out. So being very mindful of that is important. And a lot of times we don't recognize that. So you want to do that work. The other thing it would be easy would be also the question to ask yourself, well, what clearly is not working well? Where am I struggling right now? So in specific for physicians, I could say, are patients messaging you more? So we know there's data that patients tend to message female physicians more. Why that is, that can be an entire different conversation. But is there something very specific that you're struggling with? Because when we cast such a wide net, sometimes that's also, I like to start broad and then narrow in, but sometimes there are very big red flags that you can see. If you are recognizing that you're always the one stuck with all the projects, why is that? Yes, the system is terrible, but why you? Why are you being the only person that is being chosen for that? So be careful and mindful on how you are sharing with the world to treat you. And lastly, I will add to that, the way that you show up and you communicate and present yourself to the world also depends on how you treat yourself in the first place. If you are not valuing your own existence and self-worth, and constantly being self-critical, which is something that I have done in my life a lot, if I don't feel I am never enough, then the way I will show up in a space, well, I'm so grateful to be here. And yes, load me up with projects. And oh, I'm so grateful for you to like validate my existence. If you are not being cognizant of that to begin with. So I would say like communication will have all those layers, but it's so important because at the end of the day, you want to look at longevity in a workplace and what gives you joy. And are we going to keep waiting for like all of this to iron out? Because it's never going to automatically happen. You're going to have to make some conscious effort. So, how can you be in a workspace for longer in a more authentic way? You're going to have to do some conscious work to get there.
Absolutely. That was beautifully said. There's no way I was going to say it anywhere close to that. But as you were talking, I think to summarize that would be the standard that you set for yourself is the standard that others are going to set for you or have of you, I think is how I would say it. Is just you've got to put yourself together and have the confidence and have the self-worth that you were talking about. And as you present yourself that way and you set those standards and you put up those barriers to say, hey, this is how I'm going to operate, people will do the same for you. If someone sets those boundaries and say, hey, don't text me, or I'm not available during these times, you're not going to be the one that they come to say, hey, I have 7 different projects that I want you to work on and I'm going to dump them on you, because you just haven't you've set the standard that that's not what you're about. And I think that's really important, especially in an early career physician, when they do feel like they need to, I guess, prove themselves. It might be the word. I know in residency and in rounds that you guys have, there's a lot of, you can tell who's doing really well and who's kind of lower in the pack. And I think regardless of where you are in residency, once you come and you're attending, you're still the young, you're the new one, right? You're the fresh meat out there as an attending physician. And so there's a need to prove yourself. And so I think it's really important what you just said, that even if you are new, whether you're day one of attending, you're 3 or 4 years in, you need to set the standard of how you want to operate. It could change through your career, right? You may have a certain way of doing it in your early years, and then you either better the standard or change your standard later in your career. But I think setting the tone early is incredibly important. That's why I hope that there's physicians out there that are struggling with that reach out to you and say, okay, I do want to set a new standard. There's the way it's working right now is not working, and what can I do, and how can I leverage your expertise to help me put up that standard to where I want it to be. So that's awesome.
Thank you.
One thing that I saw recently from you that kind of fits into my world as well is financial wellness. Something that you said was extremely important. You had a guest on or a conversation with a financial expert that was well received. I mean, I saw all the comments and I saw the likes. It seemed like it was a great opportunity for the folks that could enjoy that. But why do you feel like financial wellness is super important for early career physicians?
Yeah. Just on a side note, the guest that I had, Dr. Sapna Shah, she's a physician. She has an MBA. She does not
Okay.
like to call herself as a financial expert, but she has such a great fund of knowledge. And I had her
Hmm.
so that it was just like two physicians just talking about it.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that it was so well received. And so financial wellness is important because you have to ask yourself, why are you doing the job that you're doing as an early career physician? Is it so that you can get rid of debt? Is it that okay, now you're supposed to be doing this job because you just got done with years of training? It all comes back to recognizing, are you doing this because you want to or because you have to? And when you go into the I have to do this, then you're going to be taken advantage of constantly. Then you will not negotiate. You won't, again, coming back to like, what is your worth? What is the schedule that you deserve? What is a humane schedule? What is a schedule in which you will be allowed to exist as a human? As I mentioned earlier, where I felt like there was a time that my existence as a human did not have space in my existence in medicine. So these are all questions, and I'm always very like transparent about that. That's why I host the physician wellbeing Q&A series, and I call other experts. Like we had healthcare attorneys talk about contracts, and part of that is knowing what is your pay structure really. Like how many early career physicians know the details of what their pay structure is? Base
Hmm.
salary, bonus, where's all of it going? So this is all coming from a space of empowerment and autonomy so that you are doing the job that you want to do, not that you have to do. And you're continuing to then build on that narrative, right? You're continuing to have independence financially on the side. And it's not that you're for all your life going to be trading hours for dollars. So I would love to see all physicians empowered. It doesn't have to be whatever stage they are at, and choosing to practice medicine from a space of, I want to do this. And then how do they show up for their patients? They're going to deliver excellent care. And I do firmly believe that having good financial wellness with all of this is important because at the end of the day, if you can tell yourself, okay, mentally I feel, and a lot of times I have with my clients too that are early career physicians, we've done coaching around like, well, there was a lot of overwhelm and anxiety, but it all boiled down to the fact that there was financial planning that needed to be done. There was estate planning that needed to be done because I think I heard a number on the AMA site, I believe it's 24% physicians are early career physicians have done some sort of estate planning. That's it.
Hmm.
So, all those things, when you put them in place, it allows you to show up clinically and in your life in a good, solid, stable way. And then you can just continue to thrive from there.
Absolutely. And I love now being a part of the physician community in the sense of being an advocate. I love that there's so many advocates out there for physicians in all the different wellness areas, but specifically in financial wellness, just because you guys have dedicated years of your life primarily focused on medicine. And there's not finance that is taught, probably in undergrad, to be honest, just because most doctors take pre-med or biology or biochemistry or whatever it may be. But then also through medical school and through residency and even fellowship, as you've experienced, financial literacy is just not taught. And it doesn't not necessarily just finances, but entrepreneurship and business and all of that is not taught. And so I love that now there's so many more advocates out there that are doing it to help physicians in a meaningful and thoughtful way, not just taking advantage of them to say, okay, these physicians don't know anything and they don't, let's just, we'll be the expert, right? And we'll just come in and help them. But they're doing it for the wrong reasons. And I love that there's so many people out there. And the doctor that you mentioned that has the MBA, that's fantastic that she came on the Q&A and did that. I know an attorney as well. I don't know if you know Amanda Hill, but
Amanda
her
was one of our
advocate.
guests.
Perfect. There you go. See, so another advocate that from a contract standpoint that just betters the livelihood of physicians because you guys have worked so hard. And I feel like that's just understated to the outside world. If you look at a patient, right? If you ask a patient about a physician's world and all the struggles that they're going through, they're just like, no, doctors don't really have any struggles. They make a ton of money. They get all this time. They can retire early. They live in big houses and drive nice cars, and they make assumptions about doctors. And unfortunately, that's just not true. And you guys are some of the hardest working people in the country. And so seeing all the advocates that are out there, specifically in financial wellness, which is near and dear to my heart. I just love seeing it. So I think it's very cool what you're doing with the Q&A sessions and specifically helping early career physicians getting them on the right path now, right? And giving them this information now so that they're not 20, 25 years into their career thinking, man, I wish I would have done this differently. And how can I change this before I retire? You're giving them those building blocks today so that they can make good informed decisions throughout the rest of their career. So that's awesome.
Thank you.
I'm just throwing out compliments today.
I
You
know, I'm
deserve all
trying
of
to
them.
soak them all in.
You're just like, oh man, what do I say next? Yeah. One of the last things I wanted to talk to you about. So there was a post on LinkedIn from you near the end of 2023. You're already smiling, so you know which one I'm talking about. Took a lot of courage to put it out there. So you shared a great montage of photos displaying your weight loss journey of about 90 pounds. In the post, though, you also shared some things that changed for you that allowed that weight loss journey to happen. And so I'm going to read off a couple of those things. And I want you just to dive into them because they're not really weight loss related. They're just more empowerment, I think is the best way to do it. So here are a few things that you mentioned, that I want to dive deeper into. One was enlisted help from my coach to break this seemingly impossible task into tangible steps. What does that mean?
Well, I wanted to, and just really quick, I know that talking about weight loss can be triggering for many individuals. And my intent is not to say like there's one form that's more morally superior for me. My physician had suggested, and I had to do it for my health. And that's why I share my journey. Because when I've been on the other side and I see how that feels like. So
Perception.
when I set the goal, okay, it's 90 pounds, never going to happen. You can't just like put that big goal, and it happened over, like, the journey has been over 4 years. I just also like to say that it's a really big goal. What am I supposed to do with that goal? And to be persistent and consistent in doing what you're doing needs to take that big goal and boil it down into very tangible, specific steps that work for you. Not like there's lots of posts out there, there are great like recipes out there. My post could be one of those posts that are in the ether, but how can I make it applicable to me? So that is something that I got help from my coach who actually, the first thing was that it wasn't about the weight loss or the weight or the actual pounds to begin with. It was a lot of mental drama that was happening. So to take something that is so big and to turn it into so concrete, well, at the end of the day, here are 3 things that you actually need to do and just keep doing so you can get to your goal.
Gotcha. Tangible steps, achievable steps. Don't say 90 pounds. And then one of the steps is you're going to go run 10 miles a day. It's like, regardless of your weight, running 10 miles a day is very difficult. And so, I like that you put the word tangible in front of it, like realistic and achievable goals that may take more time, right? This wasn't a 30-day weight loss journey like you described. It was over 4 years, but I think that's honestly the healthier way to do it. Another thing that you said, decided I was done being a disconnected doctor. I was going to honor my mind-body needs.
Yeah. So that's what happens in medicine. You just disconnect. You have to. So it's really funny that when you train, they teach you empathy, but then also you're not supposed to show emotions in front of patients. And when you're on rounds, if you got to use the bathroom, the rounds are going, sometimes you just can't excuse yourself, especially if you're the one who's about to get presenting. So there are lots of examples that will surface during medicine in which you end up disconnecting yourself. And I train in really good institutes where I would say that I had a lot of support during training, and still those were the messages that were just prevalent, in general, in medicine, anywhere. And then I ignored myself. I had health needs that occurred after I was done with fellowship. Actually, had to keep going to, see my doctor for a lot of different issues that had happened, and all the signs were there for the last year, and I just ignored everything. So there was literally a mind-body disconnect where I'm a workhorse and I have to just power through. And I know that all the physicians listening to this know that, okay, I'm not dying yet. I have a lot of work. Let me just keep doing the work. Ignore all of this. And anyone listening, if you need to go get your physical and get your labs, please do that. You don't want to get nasty surprise like I did. So that's what I did. And I'm done with that. So this was that recognition point.
Last one, and I think this is honestly, I can say what sparked me reaching out to you to be on the podcast, because I read through that post right before Christmas, and it was like a punch to the chest, I think, when I read this. And you may know which one I'm going to read. No one is coming to save me, and it's only my job to save me. What does that mean to you?
It means everything to me. because as someone who constantly feels disempowered in a system, because all of this journey was happening in parallel to all the other journeys that I shared before. And this is primarily my postpartum weight loss journey. There is this feeling like I'm drowning. Somebody save me, help me. And my health is terrible right now. And I'm looking around me. And even when you're working with someone, even if you're working with your coach, yes, you're getting help. How much of that help mentally is it all passive? Is just because you brought a course, just because you paid somebody to help you is not going to get you the results that you want. At the end of the day, that will bring you very close to success. Me not having a coach, me not getting into specific programs, all of that brought me closer. But at the end of the day, I was the one who had to put the fork down, and I was the one who had to go to the gym. And I was the one who had to pivot and go back in training and get more training and pivot and get another job that I love and pivot and start a business. At the end of the day, there was no one, even the ones that loved me and wanted to help me, my mom, my husband, other people. Nobody can help you. At the end of the day, you have to help yourself. And you have to recognize, please stop waiting. There's no knight in shining armor situation. You have to get up and you have to do this for yourself.
Yeah, and that was well said. I appreciate you for sharing that. Just to kind of expand on that one sentence that is so powerful. There's a saying, and I'm good at remembering sayings. I'm not good at remembering who says them. It's a bad tick of mine. Even when there's a handout to help you, it's up to you to take it, like to take that hand.
Yes.
And I think what you just said is exactly that. I mean, you could have your brother, your parents, close friends, colleagues that mean well and do want to help you, and they can offer help. It's up to you though to actually take the action and push forward. And you certainly did that. And I commend you for sharing that post. That's a tough one. I went through a weight loss journey right around the same time I was just describing, 2013, 2014. I was probably in the best shape of my life, 2019, the age of 31 or 32. Way better than when I was playing football in high school. And so, yeah, I remember sharing posts like that. And it was just, it goes back to that communication, like having that communication and being able to share that with people kind of takes away some of the feelings that you were having probably throughout that 4-year journey that you had, and some of the thoughts that you had during that time. Kind of that post probably was a weight off your shoulder. I don't want to speak for you, but I would imagine that it was getting that post out there was just kind of like I feel relieved or even validated because that post had hundreds of likes and hundreds of comments in support of you, which I think is fantastic, and you deserve all of it. But that had to feel great.
Actually, Nate, I felt pretty nervous, and it was more of
leading up to it, right?
Yeah, leading up to it, and it was more of my intent. I think that this is my weight loss journey. I've been very private about it. This was the only post that I made formally because, again, I know what it is to be on the other side, and when you're struggling, you don't sometimes like to see this, but I know that I wanted to share because in the past, when I have shared, such as with my postpartum depression, I have been surprised that it has generated healing, not just for myself, but for others around me. So I gave myself this target that, okay, you get one post this year. And this is the one post that you'll see from 2023. And yes, there was a lot of support afterwards, and I felt very held, and it was a nice feeling. But I guess my intentions were, still, okay, I'm just daring myself to do it. Let's just do it one time.
And it felt great afterwards. But again, I think it goes back to what I said about you earlier is I think there's some purpose behind it. And because now that's another story within your journey that can help you become a better coach, a physician coach, a life coach, that you have that experience now that you can share with others that may be going through the same thing, but also don't want to speak up about that same thing or don't know where to start. And then you become that hand that you're holding out and say, hey, take this hand. I promise you take this hand. I've experienced this. I can help you through it. So I think that's really powerful.
Thank you.
Another thank you after a compliment. There you go. Last thing then, what is next for Early Career Physicians Institute and Dr. Shabbir in 2024?
In 2024, I want to spread my message to as many early career physicians as I can. and I want to really continue to empower and support them in every shape or form that I can. Right now, through my website, earlycareerphysician.com, there is a variety of free resources that you can access. And the physician wellbeing Q&A series, which I mentioned, happens once a month. And right now, the speakers are planned all the way up to June. After that, I'll reconsider for the next season. But it's a way that individuals can get help every month. And other than that, the free resources are there. And I'm continuing to offer coaching one-on-one. I probably will be also sharing some group programs in the future. So for me, this year is all dedicated to helping new graduates from medical training in the first 7 years, either as attendings or them starting practice in private practice, whichever setting they are, to help them thrive with life and really show up that way. That's why even my newsletter that I started on Substack, it's called Early Career Physician Wellness. Through that, I'm also offering a space for early career physicians to pretty much just hang out and with me once a month. We're just going to have like an open Q&A office hours style. Come and talk to me about any and everything. So this is what it is. And for me, individually, I think this is it. This is what gives me joy. And I really, really want to reach out as many early career physicians as I can.
That is absolutely fantastic. I greatly appreciate you coming onto the show today. I'm grateful for us connecting with each other and having this conversation today. And I look forward to our paths crossing in the future.
Thank you so much for having me, Nate.